Take the Leap is the podcast where we get real about the roller coaster that is entrepreneurship and life. Sure, some folks make running a business look like a walk in the park, but let's be honest, it's more like a wild ride through a theme park with a lot of unexpected twists and turns.
Join us, your co-hosts, Ashlan
and Tori,
as we spill the beans on our own real-life experiences and shine a spotlight on some amazing guests. From the highs of success stories to the lows of epic failures. And hey, we'll even throw in some cringe-worthy, laugh-out-loud, embarrassing moments for good measure.
So buckle up and tune in every Tuesday and Thursday for a dose of raw, unfiltered truth about what it's really like to chase your dreams and build a business.
Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just dipping your toes into the startup world, we've got something for everyone. Even if it's just to make you think, wow, I'm glad I didn't do what they did.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the Take the Leap podcast. I am so excited to interview today with Spencer Hill. Spencer is a dedicated nonprofit leader with over 12 years of experience in roles ranging from direct service program work to overseeing strategic programs and partnerships at the national level. As a biracial Black man in the Pacific Northwest, Spencer's lived experience growing up in a predominantly white community with oppressive systems has shaped his commitment to creating equitable environments for those systematically marginalized by our society. His expertise spans organizational culture, diversity, equity, inclusion-centered strategy, and program assessment, all grounded in his belief that positive relationships and equity are healing forces. Driven by a mission to empower organizations, Spencer specializes in developing strong leaders, creating healthy work cultures, prioritizing DEI work, and shifting mindsets from saviorism to empowerment. With more than 17 years of mentoring youth and families, he brings certified therapeutic mentoring and motivational interviewing skills to his work. Spencer also serves on the board of Project 48, which ensures that children impacted by foster care have access to high-quality resources as they transition into care within the first 48 hours. He served as a My Brother's Keeper ambassador, connecting young Black men to mentorship opportunities within their community and across the country. Welcome, Spencer. It's so good to chat with you today.
Thank you so much for being on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
All right. We're going to start out like we always start out these episodes. What is your Take the Leap story? Why did you decide to journey into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. So when I was leaving the national role, which Ashlan obviously we're quite familiar with, I joined an organization in Seattle that worked in the sector of caregiving. They also were a very large nonprofit, but they were focused on caregivers for the state of Washington. And, for whatever reason, not to get into specifics, it just wasn't the right fit. And so having transparent conversation with my direct report, it was actually pretty fascinating. I resigned within 90 days of the role, which I'd never done anything like that in my career ever. Now, here's where it got interesting. While I was a director for this organization, we were working with a consultant that I knew my supervisor was not too pleased with. And so through my resignation, I essentially told them that I do have capacity to continue some type of working relationship. And so essentially I was moved into that consulting role. And hence that is what essentially started my entrepreneur, journey. They were my first client. They've been my longest client, still with them today, going on 3 years. And so, we've had a lot of shifts within the first kind of role that I was able to provide them. But very blessed for them, have a great relationship with them. And obviously many blessings have followed for my consulting business.
I love that story. That's so cool. Like, I mean, so many things about it. But first of all, the fact that you kind of knew within the first 90 days that this was not the fit for you, and you were honest with yourself about that and decided to do something about it. But then you did it in such a way that you were able to say, okay, this isn't working for me, but maybe in this capacity it could. And it kind of evolved from there. And I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs find themselves in the same boat, and especially when they're honest with themselves about what works and what doesn't, that's kind of where the magic happens. So I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing that.
No, absolutely. And, I'm glad you really touched on that, because I will say, like, I'm a pretty spiritual person, I'd say. And much of, that's why I even appreciate your title, leap of faith going into entrepreneurship and all of this. And it's just like, that's essentially really what it really was. But it was like heavily connected to my spirituality. And so, like you pointed out, I was listening to my body. It just, a lot of things were not in alignment. A lot of things were not balanced. And it wasn't, again, anything to say that that's a bad organization, or, I hated my job or whatever. It just was not the right fit. It was starting to impact me in many different ways. I was essentially a new dad at the time. My son was 1 year old. The pandemic was still obviously, very relevant at the time and all of that. And just to be frank, like, I was scared shitless to abandon the, normalized 9 to 5 role and all of this. And so it was quite an interesting time to take that leap. Uh, and I'm just very thankful that I was able to overcome fear, and essentially, just created this new path, this new journey for myself as far as my career.
That's really incredible. Like that you were just able to listen to yourself regardless of the outside circumstances of COVID and everything else going on. And I mean, I have a young son as well, so I know what it's like to be an entrepreneur and a parent. But I have a little bit of a follow-up question that I kind of just thought of from hearing you. That whole idea of listening to yourself and listening to your body and making sure that your job and your role is right for you. I found that I had a difficult time dealing with that in a traditional 9 to 5 workspace. I became an entrepreneur, but it's still something to this day that I find maybe like the wrong client, that's not quite the right fit. And I still find myself dealing with that occasionally as well. And I guess I just wanted to ask you, have you found that as well as an entrepreneur with different clients? And like, do you have kind of a process for maybe weeding that out and making sure that it's an aligned fit when
Yeah.
you take on new clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit right before I get to that. So one of my great mentors in this leap that I took was my sister. She had been in the consulting realm for almost a decade, very successful, and she had been pushing me for years to at least just consider, like, hey, like, consulting really might be a great look for you. And so, when all came to be, and I finally did take that leap, had a really just a lot of conversation with her, obviously, about the approach to the work now. And essentially, what are the values that I want to carry as, a founder, principal consultant, all the above. And I'm going to be honest, like it at the beginning stage, if I'm being quite frank, my filtering process of my quote unquote potential clients wasn't as refined as it is now, because at the point, like, I need
Money.
partners.
Yeah,
Yeah,
money. We need money. We're in a capitalist society.
Yeah,
Let's just name it.
like,
Yeah.
come on, like, I got a young child. I'm the breadwinner for the family. Like, yes, we need to start having some revenue come in to my business to make sure that, like, this, I didn't just ruin my life by taking this leap. But obviously, as time goes on and you are given the opportunity and the blessing to be a little bit more selective, absolutely. I go back to my grandmother before she passed. She had this saying, all money isn't good money.
Yes. Yes.
My sister, in one of the conversations, well, many of the conversations, she essentially alluded to a successful consultant, especially in areas that I consult in, heavily prevalent around equity and things of that nature. But she essentially would say a successful consultant is not with an organization for that long. For essentially two specific reasons. One, you've come in and you've done your job, and it's time to let go of the hand holding. And this organization needs to hold themselves accountable and start to implement, these new whatever you've determined for recommendations, and they need to stand strong on them.
Mm-hmm.
Or you've identified that this organization is extremely performative or full of shit, and you need to abandon ship and get out of there before your mental health starts to just absolutely go awry. And so, kind of taking that conversation I had with her, and then essentially, whether it's a very formalized process of assessment of organizations, or just my natural ability to be able to do some research and see this organization,
and
like,
suss out,
they
like,
really,
you really going to do this, or is it going to be an audit and an assessment that sits in Google Drive
exactly,
that you don't ever touch again? Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
From intro conversations with the execs and all of that, I can sniff the bullshit, pretty
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
And so, I am at a point that, yeah, I'm not just going to do the dance,
Yeah.
just for the hell of it. I take my work very seriously. I take pride in what I do, and the successes that I've been able to have, and the impacts I've been able to have. And so, yeah, all money isn't good money.
Yeah. I love that. Can I please use that saying for
I
myself?
think that's going to be a quotable from this episode.
Yes.
All money's not good money.
Exactly.
Oh, it's a really good way to put it. And that's a really good reminder, because it's not. And I think the thing is too, as a consultant, if you're not passionate about the work you're doing, if you are burning out, if you're not feeling good about it, not only is that going to show, but like, your reputation is based on your previous clients and the work that you do for them. And if you stay too long with one that you just kind of get burnt out from, and you don't really have any results to show, like, that's not really helping you either. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
that's a good reminder. Well, let's kind of move on to our next question, which is, what piece of advice would you give to yourself when you started knowing what you know now?
What piece of advice would I give myself? Knowing what I know now. Okay, so obviously, being an entrepreneur, you understand that there are going to be peaks and valleys.
Yes.
And, to be quite transparent, I was extremely blessed as soon as I started operating as a business. And so at the same time, I didn't really recognize the importance of, like, quote unquote networking, or, keeping your irons to the fire, and cultivating all these. Cause, like, I was like, no lie, like, I was just getting a ton of emails. Hey, we need you for this. Hey, da, da. And, like, I mean, I had never filled out an RFP. I had never, like, done any type of formal thing. These are all like spit on the hand, shake it, let's get to work. And that is what I prefer. But let's also be honest. And I kept telling myself, I know this is not going to be
all
like,
the time and forever. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm flying high right now, and what a time to be alive. But I know that, like, this is not going to maintain and sustain, forever. There's going to be some low times. And so, to be honest, I just relocated, uh, living close to Seattle now. And, I would say, like, I mean, I'm not, dead in the dirt by any means, but momentum has slowed just from transitioning and contracts, coming to an end and all of that. And so I think, the advice I would give myself is, while, yeah, you were flying high and all these things, there still is absolutely value and an importance to, continuously be working on these side relationships.
Absolutely.
Just to, there's this saying, and I used to believe it, even in like sports or whatever have you, but like one of the hardest things is once momentum has slowed is to rebuild it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, and it's not to say that like, you're always going to have some slow moments and all of that, of course, but you don't like the slower it becomes, the harder it is to like regain that force, that motion to get it back to where it was when you were flying high. And so, I've been head down, coffee here, coffee there, da, 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 like all these things to like, really build it back up. And thankfully I'm a go-getter, so I'm not experiencing a lot of challenge in that space. But still, if I was talking to myself 3 years ago, I would absolutely tell like, hey, you need to structure your week, and like there needs to be like a 4-hour pocket at least weekly that all you're doing is just sending emails and checking up with folks.
Mm-hmm.
Or once every 2 weeks, you need to have coffee with a new potential client, and just shoot the shit. Like just things like that I think obviously long term would alleviate any possible lost motion of momentum.
Well, you bring up such a good point that I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs get is, and I say this being somebody who does marketing for people, the relationship building is probably so much more important than if I send an email newsletter for you, if I put a reel up on your Instagram. Like nothing will beat the, like you said, having coffee and shooting the shit. I think that's how I was like, oh, hey, Spencer, you won't be on the podcast? Because like,
Exactly. Right?
we're
Yeah.
like,
Never
let's
know.
just catch up. And that always be like, people are like, oh, do you have space? And I was just like, I'm always looking for clients. We might not be able to start tomorrow, but there's, we're recording this at the beginning of November. There's December, there's January. You can, if it makes you feel better, you can put a deposit down out of this year's budget and we'll be ready for you in 2025. There's always that, that piece of it. And, I had the same experience when I first started out. It was like everybody's like, hey, you're available, do this, do that. And then, it was all good. And I was not doing the steady drumbeat of like, who's the next? When's stuff coming? Yep. Oh my gosh, this client lost their grant funding. Guess what? Guess what goes? Sort of thing. Yep. So that is really great advice to remember when you first start out. Awesome. All right, last question on the regular questions before we throw you for some hot seat questions. What is your why? Why do you do the work that you do?
Yeah. I think it just goes back to, even just 101 of my career, working with, so, obviously, Ash, but like working with youth was forever just at the core of who I wanted to be as a professional and what I wanted to do and all of these things. And, at our time, at Friends of the Children together, and one of the absolute things that I believed in as director of programs and would just be head over heels, excited to talk about with anyone across the country was the power of relationships. It really is something that you can't even like quantify it. Sometimes you can't even like put it into data and this and that. It's magic. And so, one thing I am grateful for is that I can kind of take that similar work, that similar magic, and embed it, into my consulting business. And one of the things that I put, I believe you even read it out with my bio, is really focusing on like equitable relationships and things like that. And it's like, a lot of people are like, well, what does that even mean? Blah, blah. And it's just like, that's the secret sauce, because I am not your average consultant. It's like the one, I can't remember whose quote it is, but it's like that one quote, like people won't really remember like what you did or, what you accomplished or this or that, but they'll remember how you made them
feel. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so it's like, for my consulting partnerships, even just that, I don't really use the word client.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's too clinical. I think it's too, all these things. Like, no, I call them partners for multiple reasons, because I'm not the only one that's doing this work, y'all. Like, we need to collaborate
Yes.
together. I will be a guide for you. I'll keep everything honed in and directional, but like you got some, things you need to do yourself. So we're partners. But then also like it's just more personable.
Yeah.
It humanizes the relationship of when I am working with these organizations and things like that. And then one of the things that I really pride myself on, which, I think shows, through my past partnerships, is how I've made them feel. Like I come in, I this is vulnerable stuff, especially in the equity
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
Like I'm essentially coming in and like pulling all the skeletons out of the closet. And if I was an asshole, I could be like, well, gosh, you're terrible at that. You're terrible at this. Like, this. Look at this exit interview this person met. Like, who do we need to fire? This
Mm-hmm.
is, and it's like, no, like I'm gonna humanize this. These are all people. These are all, diverse backgrounds, experiences, etc. But yeah, I truly do emphasize still the relationship piece as my why.
Mm-hmm.
When I step into these organizations, when I step into these contracts, like I don't ever just look at it like, oh, this is a money grab or this
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no,
Yeah.
these are people
Yeah.
that are coming into this organization, coming into this work, that are going through a divorce, or they feel like shit. Their grandma just passed from COVID, like whatever have you. Like we all have our real lives. And so while we're doing whatever the project is, whatever the work is, I'd say that's still my why. I want people to feel good. I want people to feel valued, like whatever have you, however that looks. So that still is like to the core. And one of the things that it's ironic, a lot of my contracts that I come into is kind of like mitigating,
Lawsuits, basically. Be like, let's not have a lawsuit.
yeah,
That's the real. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
the fires going on.
Mm-hmm.
I even had, Ash, our contact, our similar contact, but Agnes, like I have a joke with her, like I'm almost like turning into like the garbage man, like I come these,
You do the dirty work, Spencer. You
yeah,
gotta do the dirty hands-on work. I mean, yeah, it's
pretty
rough.
crazy.
Yeah.
And so while, we are able to mitigate whatever challenges are currently happening and all of that, but I there's always like one or two staff members that like, you just are able to really bond with and like
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
formulate like a true relationship. Well, I usually come in and I'm like interim, PD or ED or whatever have you, more times than not, because obviously when I transition out, that job needs to be filled. More times than not, I am successful with actually taking somebody that was already internal and able to
Mm.
coach them, work with them, all these things. But from my relationship that I was able to establish with them, and I've had a high success rate of actually getting them promoted into that role. I'm talking one person I'm truly thinking of. I mean, this was a ground level staff, service
Wow.
provider, all of that, that I was able to jump up over 2 tiers and became the director of programs for this,
Yeah.
nonprofit. I mean, it's just things like that. That's my why.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really amazing because I do feel like people overlook internal talent all the time.
Oh,
They think the silver bullet is hiring this fancy person over here that's
yep.
gonna, heal all ills. So I really love that. And I mean, one of the reasons that I really loved working with you is you have that really people first approach. Like we are all individuals. We see things from our own unique lens. And sometimes because of power dynamics or whatever's happening in organizations, people don't, they see us as numbers, they don't see us as people, they don't notice what might be happening. Stress
Yep.
and burnout's a real fucking thing. And
Yeah.
and some people hide it really good. And then people are like,
Until they
well,
don't.
until
Yeah.
they don't, yeah, until the
Yeah.
kettle boils over.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, awesome.
That's incredible. I love that. Well, are you ready for our hot seat questions? We like to make them sound scary, but they're not. So my first question, I usually start off with this one because we've gotten some really incredible answers from it, is what is the best and or worst advice you've ever received in your entire career?
Oh gosh. I kind of already touched on it, but like the conversations with my sister and, um, well, actually, I'm going to take that back. First mentor or second mentor, my sister being first. But anyway, I met this gentleman randomly out in public. Found out he's been a consultant for over 2 decades, Fortune 500 companies, like blah blah blah. And I had a conversation with him. We had a call, and I'm new in the game, and so I'm just like ready to do whatever, roll up my sleeves. And he looks at me, and he's like, "Arrowhead, man." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You need to hone it in and focus on just one thing right now.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? If I say, what is your business? What are you consulting in? Blah, blah, blah. It should be so specific." And so it's this kind of, visualization of like an arrowhead, like just being fired off, and it's just piercing. It's just that one entry point, that one approach. Now, of course, as you go with it, you can expand and do other things. But you should always be able to go back to that one core initiative that you specialize in. And so I think that really, I really valued that when he said that. And because y'all, this was like brand new and with my business at the time. I wouldn't even call it a business. It was just a whole bunch of ideas like just flustering in my head. But that conversation really did ground me. And I think just really kind of start to cement that path forward for me to make this a successful business.
That's awesome. Yeah,
that is really great.
Yeah, that's a conversation that I often have with clients of, you can offer this really wide range scope of services, but it's so much to chase down buyers for each of those things, especially if they I have lots of multi-passionate entrepreneurs that I coach and consult with. And I'm like, okay, what do you want to be known for? Because some of these things don't happen together in a single person, and not saying that they can't, but if you're not drawing enough from at least one of these, it's going to be hard to just fill cups with all of them as well. So,
exactly. Well, the consulting world, especially for what I do, it's my opinion in the matter is it's oversaturated. I almost think that it became like cliche of a lot of people, I'm an equity consultant. And I've met some consultants that, say that they do equity, and I'm like, stop.
Yeah.
Like, stop it.
Yeah.
You're almost like actually making this organization good. You are promoting inequities right now. Like, stop it. And so, I think at the same time, while you have this, large bucket full of consultants, like, what differentiates you? What is your unique magic to kind of take you away from just this, mold of all these consultants that essentially are doing the same thing? And that's where I tie it back into relationships. I'm not a dry person. I'm not this, I'm not that. Like, I'm going to be real with you. We can still do great things. Like, I remember I was working with this one organization, y'all, and like, they were so lifeless, so dry. And I remember one meeting, and I said this, y'all, literally in front of like their execs, all of it. I'm like, y'all, it's okay to laugh in a meeting. Like, it doesn't
detract at all. Yeah.
No.
From the work product, y'all. I'm saying that was an interesting project. So just things like that, like, how do you kind of break the mold? How do you separate yourself? And that arrowhead, is a great start to that. Like, this is exactly what I do, because equity is a very large spectrum. We all know that, and so what piece of equity am I going to focus on? But then, what are the intangibles I can bring following that arrowhead to separate me even more from the clutter?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I have your next question, because I know you do a lot of work as a consultant for nonprofits. What inspires you to serve on nonprofit boards? Or can you talk a little bit about Project 48 or your experience as a My Brother's Keeper ambassador?
Yeah, for sure. Again, I think I just naturally bond with nonprofits because that was such a vast, part of my career. Um, Oftentimes when I was just having this conversation actually, obviously we were blessed, Ash, to have worked for a very large nonprofit, a very successful nonprofit. We got to see the ins and outs of like what makes a nonprofit absolutely dynamic,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
In multiple phases. It was very eye opening for me, just coming from the local chapter to national level to be able to see at large how holistically everything needs to essentially be running, just like a car, if you want to essentially be great and be at that high level.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I think like that connects me back to nonprofits because more so than not, especially like small to mid-sized nonprofits, they are doing the most amazing work. They are absolutely like their heart is in it, whether it's lived experience or just absolutely drawn for whatever life experience that they went through or whatever have you. The passion, the work is there. It's the other things that kind of like, they need some consulting on or need some support with operationally, or like, why is development and program literally interchangeable? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
they're one of the same. Like, you
Yep.
can't have one
Without
without
the
the other.
other. Yeah.
Um, so, it's just things like that that like draw me into working with nonprofits. Uh, I truly do prefer to work with small to mid-size. It gets tough because, obviously financially they're not usually in a place that they can bring in a consultant, at a higher rate. And so I even like work with them if I'm truly drawn into their mission, or, help assist them with potential, resources that they could, essentially apply for and then get some support in that way. But that even gets me so like back to Project 48, the founder, Brandy, just this amazing, woman. And one thing that I would always tell her, like sitting on the board, is just like, I love sitting on this board because you are as real as it gets. You are not some founder, CEO that is good with numbers, or you have a large network out in the community so you can fundraise your ass off. Like, no, like, you are a woman that literally lives this mission. She has a large family. I believe 4 of the youth come from foster care, and have transitioned fully. And I mean, she just lives. I mean, the whole business idea came from gaps that she was recognizing from just being, a foster mom.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, that passion, that authenticity, was absolutely moving when she approached me, and we just had coffee. And actually, I mean, honestly, by the time we had coffee one time, I circled back with her and I said, "How can I be a part of this organization?" This is, I want to say, like 4 or 5 years ago now. And, it was very small, very, very small. I mean, I think 3 people. Um, and, obviously, like, still figuring out, like, how's this going to look? How is this going to truly, like, and it's pretty fascinating. Uh, at a very quick rate, she was able to build one of the most dynamic boards I've actually seen for a small nonprofit, and it's because of her. It's because of her. It's because of the mission. Because we get to see the work tangibly right in front of us, and all of the things like, that just absolutely like inspiration. And I can almost, well, I know a couple, but I can bet my hat that like most board members probably were similar to myself, circling back with her, like, hey, I want to be on the board, or I want to be a part of this however I can, yada, yada, yada. Not her having to like seek out people like, will you please help and support by considering being on my board? Things like that. So, but yeah, Project 48 is a very special organization. I've been on the board now for a very long time. Um, and yeah, I love supporting their mission and what they do.
Love it.
That's really cool. I love that you say that too, because being as we're all from the nonprofit world in, various capacities, I think we've all had, different experiences with different boards, different staff. And I think one of the things that I've recognized in the nonprofit world is that sometimes they do have a really good, purpose, and it's just not they're not growing for many reasons, and one of them is because of the fact that they don't have a dynamic staff, or they don't have a dynamic board, or they don't have the resources and things like that. And so hearing about nonprofits who are doing it really well and is really inspiring. And it's also kind of, I'm hoping that eventually there will be kind of like that mind shift in that community and in that industry of, we can do things differently. We don't have to do them the way that they've always been done, or, we don't have to be boring about this, or, whatever it is. So it's really encouraging to hear you say that. And
Yeah.
it kind of off of that question kind of brings me to the next one is are there any challenges or roadblocks or things that are unique to working with nonprofits that you face on a regular basis? I know that Ashlan and I probably have some of our own answers to that question as well.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. One of my most recent partners, it was a really challenging situation that I stepped in on. The program was just absolutely declining at a very rapid rate. And this is an organization that's been around for over 2 decades, heavily known within the mentoring, youth service providing community. And so I was actually surprised to get the call, because I'm like, what? Like, this organization kills it. What are we talking about? So anyway, that was one of the most challenging, because seeing an organization that has essentially just lost its way for very specific reasons. And, this is why leadership is also a strong suit that I offer in services. But I mean, the emphasis on poor leadership is detrimental to any type of organization, I don't care what the sector is. And for this partner of mine, that was the main cause of the decline, is just absolute poor leadership. And so within that, though, like, it created such survival type mentality for culture. And it was just, I mean, it was pretty heavy and gruesome. Started to take on like a cult type feel. The divide was. I've seen some divides over my time, and especially in nonprofits. This was one of the worst I've ever seen, to the point like blatant harassment, to exec and leaderships and things like that. It was bad. So anyway, I say it was the most challenging because that partner experienced the most layoffs I've ever had to essentially recommend, because it was a complete rebuild. I essentially told the president at the time, the organization that we once knew is no longer here. And so we need to shift our mindset as far as bringing this down to ground zero. And essentially, what are we trying to rebuild? Even what are you trying to pick and choose from, what you maybe were doing well back then, so that we can keep that, authenticity in this new life that we're getting ready to develop. And so, it was challenging. I mean, I've gone through, a couple layoffs, some firings, things of that nature. This was much different, though, because we're talking, double digit layoffs. And obviously, people that work in nonprofit sector, specifically, youth serving organizations, they're not making a lot of money. And it's like, I know that this is greatly going to impact their personal lives. And so I even found myself, even on a personal note, like, after my very tense conversations I had with the selected staff one-on-one to let them know what was currently going to take place, I did offer even after that, like outside of my consulting relationship and all of that, but like human to human, if there's anything I can do to support you. Like obviously I know a lot of organizations, whatever I can do to help support you, but for whatever reason, this fit it was not the right fit. It was not working anymore. And we're doing a completely, org chart reshift, like everything. I mean, it's it has the same name, but it's a new organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess that's a really good point, because I've been talking to people about this a lot more lately about, reorganizations. Like corporations do it all the time. And I know nonprofits are not corporations, but nonprofits are still businesses. And oftentimes, I mean, we'll use COVID as an example. People had to learn completely different ways to do a lot of things that still needed to happen, especially nonprofits had a hard time because, we're talking about right here, relationship building, like Zoom. I mean, I felt so blessed that we already met on Zoom with the rest of the network, because there were so many people that I met with that like didn't understand like the mute, unmute, your camera's on, everything's showing kind of thing.
That's real.
And so, that sort of thing. But I guess my point being is that, do you find that a lot of times when you are going into work with nonprofits, you are helping them kind of like rethink and restructure how things are done and doing a lot of that change management piece for them? And
yeah, absolutely. There's a saying like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And you know what? I don't always agree with that. And it's like, it's just really, I'm able to have these conversations though that instantly would probably be like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, get out of my office. But because I focus on the relationship, and one of the things that I always do before we even start identifying, which projects to take on and this and that and that, it's just like learn the client. Like that's one thing I feel like a lot of consultants, if I could offer, some advice to whoever is going to be hearing this, like learn your partner, learn them as a person, as a human, like strip down the onion, get to the core of who they are, what do they wish for, what is their vision, all of that. Because sometimes, like, again, we say like that passion is still there, like it's just kind of bogged down and all of that. And so here I come, like trying to, knock on it a little bit, wake it up a little bit. But then, reconnecting it to their mission, to their values, things that they absolutely believe, and then offering some new insight. Like, hey, I've seen a lot of success with other organizations that like started doing XYZ. Should we pilot it? Let's get some feedback from staff. Maybe, they'd appreciate that a little bit more, like just things like that. But again, I'm only able to have those types of conversations as far as innovation or new ways of thinking or, altering processes that have been in place, y'all, for 20 plus years. Like, I mean, organizations, we know what we do. We do what we do. And like, I hate to break it to you, but like I just interviewed each of your staff members and they don't like the way that you do it anymore. Different, or the climate outside your organization is different. So are you being equitable in how you're actually serving your specific demographic?
Right.
But again, those conversations are only able to be had because I focus on that relationship piece first.
Awesome.
That's really great.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of my work, Ash, like it is essentially like, let's turn over a new leaf.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think it's very necessary.
Yeah.
I mean, times are different, y'all. Like, come on. Like, and, like Ash, we were at Friends during the pandemic. I mean, what a new way. Here's an organization that specializes emphasizes on one-on-one in-person relationships.
Gosh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, what the hell are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
It's, you know, and I really appreciated the network at the time for the PDs and all of that, because yeah, we were just spewing out so many like, you know, creative ways to connect with the youth and families and support them and all these things. And yeah, I was completely moved, but like, really, like, shout out to at least like what we know for
Mm-hmm.
being with that organization, for how it was able to pivot, honestly,
So
almost seamlessly.
seamlessly, yeah. And I mean, you know, that the time I was with another youth serving organization, I basically watched what was happening at Friends, and I was like, "Yo, guess what? After school program, gonna do the same thing. Like
Yeah.
it's working
Oh,
over
I mean,
here. Why, you know?"
best practice is best
Yeah,
practice. Like, you know, you can twist it a little bit to meet
the need.
the specific organization, but proof is in the pudding, you know?
Absolutely. And alternatively, I was on the other side of that. I was working with a nonprofit during the pandemic, and they did not. They
Oh,
were
okay.
stuck in the mud. They did not change. They did not evolve. They did not pivot,
Yeah.
and kept trying to do in-person events when it was ready. And I remember it was a good year and a half before we could really do in-person events again, to the point where at the end of that year, we had to come together as a leadership team and basically lay off most of the staff, because, and including some people on the leadership team, because we didn't pivot as much as we'd suggested pivoting. It wasn't flying. And they since are doing great. I've been able to stay in touch with them and see how they're doing. They finally did pivot, but it took them a very long time. And I know that they were not the only nonprofit, or they were not the only business who just really were stuck in the mud for the longest time after COVID started, because they didn't want to admit that things were shifting.
Yeah. No, I mean, decisions have impact, or lack of decisions, you know, have impact. And so while it's nice that they were able to sustain and are doing, you know, in a better place now, how unfortunate, you know, for what they had to go through. But, you know, obviously that story was more frequent than anyone would hope for during that period.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. One of the nonprofit boards I volunteered with, she just kept rescheduling. She's just like, "We'll be open in 2 weeks." I'm like, "Girl, no, that's not going to happen." And so she kept like bumping, like reaching out to the venue, like, "We'll be here on this date." "Oh, wait, that's not going to happen. We'll be here until," I think it took like 2 or 3 months for her to finally like have her come to Jesus moment of like, "Oh yeah, that's really,
I mean,
this is not happening."
It was pretty interesting to see, you know, outside of like just individuals as people, but like organizations, for it to like finally understand, like, y'all, this is like the new way for who knows how long.
Yeah,
So
still is.
we're not going to be going back in 2 weeks and maintaining normal operation. Like, no, like we can't even go to the grocery store and there's no toilet paper on the shelves. Like,
we're all a mess here. Like, this is not.
People are pooping in holes in the backyard.
What a wild time that was.
Yeah.
That's so true.
You said something earlier that I did want to dig into, just for like also selfish reasons. So you talked about the relationship of development and program. And this is like, for all y'all who are not nonprofit people out there, this is a dynamic that exists in lots of nonprofits. We have program staff who are on the front lines. They are delivering the work. Spencer and I came from an organization where they were frequently underpaid for the amount of work that was in. And then, you know, you have us lovely development, marketing, communications people who are like, well, I get that, and I still need your stories. So I don't know if you have nuggets of wisdom, suggestions of how to work that magic between both departments, because it's something I hear constantly in the nonprofit space.
Yeah. I mean, whoever is listening, like, take it for what it's worth. This is just my experience and from people that, you know, I work closely with. But, you know, this scenario is as old as time. It really is. Like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And so I think ultimately the first thing that needs to exist is that both departments value each other and understand that, like, I cannot be successful with what I do if it wasn't for you,
Mm-hmm. And
and vice
vice
versa.
versa. Yeah.
That is like the first thing I can recommend, is for there to be a coming to Jesus moment, to understand you're one of the same.
Mm-hmm.
You're two legs on one body, you know. Uh, Now, so in my experience, and even from different roles, so you know, one of my good friends and extremely successful, at least for the state of Oregon, Allison Paletto, and like, I mean, she was the godmother of, development world for the state of Oregon. And I remember I would just sit back and I'd learn from her, and this was going early in my career when I was like a mentor, like on the ground working with the youth. And, she would reach out to me and seek out to me because, she knew I had the great relationships with my boys. And then I had some amazing boys like as well that, yeah, I mean, of course you want to share their story and their resilience and all the things. And so yes, I got a first glance to see just like you know how to like kind of cordially work this relationship. But I am going to be frank, like there was a time after a while, and we're talking years, like I was essentially her go-to friend. Anytime she needed something, I was her go-to friend. And there came a time after a little while that I started to feel, not even just for myself but for my youth, that we were starting to be exploited.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to have some conversations with her that, like, hey, I don't like what's going on. I'm starting to feel used. I don't feel right like bringing the boys here so that some people can take some pics and blah blah blah, and then be gone with it. And so one thing I really appreciate about Allison though is that she paused and she actually like had that conversation with me to see like why I was feeling the way, and like what were some some possible solutions that we could do. Because again, I'm starting to feel like undervalued, and I'm starting, like the youth, I'm starting to, they may not recognize it because yeah, they're 8 years old, but like I can see what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to be able to have that conversation, and then she did make some changes. Like I wasn't contacted as frequently moving forward
Yeah.
for engagement opportunities, or I even started to suggest like, hey, like we need to offer this youth and family some kickback. Like if we're using XYZ and it's raising, I did the classic wines auction, and we raised like 400, 500,000 that year. And it's just like, yeah, the kid stole the show. Absolutely. But what are we doing for this kid? What are we doing for the
Mm-hmm.
family? And
Yeah.
the organization just came up,
Yeah.
like just came up. And so, yeah, you know, all of that to say, just kind of value one another first,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
value one another.
Yeah.
Uh, and then just kind of like, whatever structures make sense for the organization. But there should be like, I do feel like I, programs that I see that are successful as far as like, working collaboratively with development so that they can raise their funds, or the grant writing processes and like
Mm-hmm.
all those things. But have some structure, like have specific like point people that really can kind of cultivate and harness that relationship with development. um, yeah, those are some things that I really see that can be a little bit more successful as far as the two working collaboratively. But I'll also say this, and this is a kudos to Allison too, and one of the reasons that I was kind of cool working closely with her and all of that. Development people, it is also your responsibility to like engage with the program and learn the
Mm-hmm.
program and
Yes.
learn these
Yeah.
kids, be on a first name. Like if you're going to use this child for
Yeah.
your little sappy 2-minute video so that you can like raise, $100,000 for your fundraiser. You better know that kid's name.
Yeah.
You better know the parent's name. You better know, like, maybe a little bit of like the kid's situation so that you're not like triggering them or whatever have you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or connect with the mentor or the service provider so that you're making sure that you're not triggering or anything like that. But just like be real, be authentic.
Yeah.
Like I get it. You have a job to do. We all have jobs to do. I get it.
Yeah.
Like you need to raise money.
Yeah.
So I understand. You better go raise money. But don't look to these youth and families like they're money grabs. They're real. And again, it gets back to what we've said the entire podcast. They're real people.
Yeah.
And these are real relationships. So act accordingly. And it's your responsibility. It's not program's responsibility to try to like draw you in. No, it's your responsibility to get into program world and truly like be a member, right? Be a teammate on the team. So those are some things that I would absolutely recommend to see some success.
Awesome. Thank you.
It's really powerful. Yeah. Just act like a human and treat other people like they're human.
I'm going to tell you what, I like to simplify a lot of things in my consulting world. And I'm serious. Like these old, like little, sayings and things like that, like they are so real, y'all. We just always overlook them or this or that. But, like, I have this one saying for a lot of my like kind of mid to large size partners. Organizations would be better off right out the gate if they actually operated and were ran like kindergarten classrooms. I'm serious. Like it's pretty fascinating. So obviously I spent a lot of time in kindergarten classrooms.
Yeah.
That's fair.
You know how they're ran, the successful ones. And it's crazy, y'all. Like I can take, rules and these and that and, the golden rule and like all of that stuff. And I can still apply it, which honestly, oftentimes I do in my consulting work. I just obviously have to add the business jargon or present it in such a way. But it's like, y'all, this is literally like just as simplified as like what goes on in a kindergarten classroom. Does everyone know their specific role? Right? Let's start with that. Do you know what you're supposed to do in this working environment? It's just how a kindergarten teacher, Bobby, you have calendar. Susan, you do this. Who wants mealtime this week? Like it's just, it's literally things like that.
It's so true.
Teachers do that is to now the kid feels engaged. They feel valued. They feel important. I could go on and on of the impacts for that child in doing so that will correlate to higher grades. I'm not going to do that right now, but you could take that same principle and apply it to adults. Do you know what your role is? Do you know what you're supposed to do in this work project? Blah, blah, blah. And you will see higher rates of productivity.
That's, oh my God, that's incredible.
Yeah, that's really true.
Incredible. I love that.
Yeah. Because so many people they're waiting for information. And you could have just told them up front. You could have just told them up front.
And they feel valued now. They know exactly what they're supposed to do. They know what that one thing that they're supposed to do is a part of the collective. And so, when that big product is done, they can be like, damn it, hell yeah. And I did this to get there. And so I feel valued. And you know what? I'm not going to leave my job now. So, now your attention is higher. Like, it's just, it's crazy.
That's,
It's pretty hilarious.
I'm stealing
and
that.
Honestly,
I'm stealing that.
Yeah, stealing that too. It's true.
It's pretty
and it's like, if we teach young kids these principles, what happens when we become adults? And like, it feels like sometimes we get ourselves in working situations or whatever, and we just forget like the golden rule, how to treat people, how to listen to people, how to.
Well, we don't see now I'm getting back to my past. We don't forget. we experience trauma.
Yeah.
And so it strips us away. But see, now you're getting into my spiritualness. And like, I truly believe that like life being a cycle as is, we are born, we are kids, we are pure, we know like we are an empty canvas. And then you have trauma that comes in and it just splatters all these things on our canvas. but then I truly believe it's our responsibility to work through that trauma. So like when we do age and we get older, we can return back to this phase of being a child. And that's why like you see a lot of like pure relationships and connection, I truly believe, between, elderly and kids they're almost one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying they're the closest to whatever you believe in, after life, but they are the
That's
closest
true.
to that energy,
Yeah.
to that essence. And I truly think that there is a strong energy between the two.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we don't forget per
Yeah.
se. We just
Good point.
experience
Yeah.
trauma. And so we build up defense
Yeah,
mechanisms.
the walls.
Armor,
Yeah.
yes, block, all these things that no, I'm not gonna do the golden rule, and I'm gonna call you a bitch because you did X, Y, Z, and blah blah. And it's like it's just
Mhm.
crazy.
Yeah.
But as you get older and wiser and all
Yeah.
that, even though you may have done this or said that, I'm not gonna call you a bitch because that's not the right thing to do.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
love
it is.
that. I love that. Well, we have one more hot seat question. And this one is something that we are asking all of our guests as we end the episodes. And that is, what is on repeat on your playlists right now? What are you listening to over and over again?
I know this is a hard one because you're into music.
Yeah.
We're trying to build.
We had someone give us a few answers too. Yeah.
Well, and I'm gonna, you know me, I got to stir the pot. I'm not even gonna do music. Like, what's honestly been on repeat more so than not is philosophy, stoicism, Audible books. I'm very passionate about self-development. It's things that I prioritize for myself. I have this belief that the more I work on myself, actually my business and career will be greater, and all these things obviously that are around me externally. And so there's a lot of things that like I like to listen to, and if it's fitting to me in my life, I'm very intentional as far as implementing it into practice. One of the things that I do try to hold, close to heart is to being true. And how dare I come into organizations or work with people and offer all these, recommendations, and you should be doing that, and you should be doing that. And then if I just came home and like was a piece of shit, and it's like, no, I need to, truly like be what I present myself to be. I want to be true to that. And so, what's on current rotation is a lot of philosophy books.
That's great.
It's just things that I hold near and dear to my heart. And I watched this one interview. It was with, I can't remember the guy's name, and wealth is wealth. Who cares, right? Like these billionaires, they don't know what's going on. But anyway, it was with a billionaire, and I can't remember his name, but he said something, and don't quote me on this, but something like, if you want to be good, like work at your craft, or like, work at your job, or whatever. You want to be great, work on yourself. And that is like stuck to me and has never let go. And so, I can't remember actually if we talked about this, but I talked with a lot of people, even the way that I like kind of structure my business and work hours and things like that. I mean, unless there's absolutely something pressing and all of that, but I take about 3 hours at the beginning of each day. I'm an early riser. I get up at 5, and I take about 3, maybe 4 hours every single day. And it's just about me.
Yeah.
It's just about
That's
me.
Great.
Before I even open up my email or get back to so-and-so, or, start to work on whatever project at hand. Because I know, like, I'm actually, I know it. I can feel myself when I'm in these meetings, or I'm sitting down doing my work, when I just, journaled for an hour, or I just read for 2 hours, or, I just meditated for 20 minutes. Like, I know I am better. And oftentimes what's crazy is, that light bulb comes out of nowhere. I don't know how the hell I just thought about that, but it's brilliant, and let's run with it. And so it's like, but it's because I work on myself, and so, as I said at the beginning of this, like, my personal and spiritual life is as heavily connected to the success of my career. And I'm truly thankful and have immense gratitude for it.
That's great.
That's wonderful.
I think
I
that
love
is so true. And I don't think you ever stop working on yourself. I think that's when people get in trouble, is when they
Yeah.
just stop, full
Yep.
stop, and not have
Yeah.
gratitude for everything, because it could be a whole lot fucking worse.
Yeah.
Life could be a lot worse.
Absolutely.
It could always be worse.
Always. Yeah, no, it never stops. That's what I tell a lot of my partners that working with equity. I'm like, you understand, there is no finish line.
Yeah, there's no end of the train tracks. It just,
Yeah,
the train
just
keeps
check
going.
the box. Yeah.
that's the first thing I want to see. What's their mindset behind the work?
Yeah.
If you think one day you're just doing this now, but fiscal year 2025, like
Yeah.
we don't have to focus on this as much. It lets me know right away. This is nothing
totally.
more.
It's it has to be sustainable. It can't just be because we got some grant money and we don't know what the hell to do with it other than it can't be performative.
Or we're trying to get more grant money.
We try to look good. Like that just doesn't fly. Yeah. Well, Spencer, thank you so much for being on with us.
Thank you.
We really appreciate your insights and what you shared.
Yes.
Is there anything that we didn't cover today that you want to make sure gets out to the world?
No, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and honestly, thank you again for the invitation. And I can't wait to actually take even a deeper dive into y'all's podcast and listen to a lot of previous interviews and all of that. So keep doing what y'all doing. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Right. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today. If you have any suggestions or recommendations for future guests, you can always send them to us on our website, taketheleap-today.com. And until next time, we'll see you for the next podcast episode. Take care now. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Take the Leap podcast. We hope you found useful takeaways you can apply to your entrepreneurial journey. Subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and keep in touch and follow us on Instagram. If you have business questions, shoot us a direct message or leave us a comment. We'll try to cover it in an upcoming episode. And visit our website, taketheleap-today.com, for more resources like our online course that accompanies this podcast.